Thanks for being here. And we haven't spoken since 2017. I think that was back in April. And I wanted to get your take on the economy since we haven't spoken in a long time. I mean, how is the economy doing since 2017? I mean, are we better off today? Is it
in an ever-expanding bubble I called it the everything bubble, but it's also the Bernanke bubble. This was created. The economy is completely supported by all of the currency creation and the low interest rates that were created because of the 2008 crisis. And, when you take base currency, the paper dollars that exist, from 0.8 trillion to 3.2 trillion, when you create all that currency and then you give it to the biggest banks and brokerage houses in the United States, you got to expect the stock market to go up, and it did. And but the currency creation, Janet Yellen stopped that, and the stock market is still going up. But by all measures, this is just it's a hyper bubble again. We're in some very dangerous territory, and we've never seen manipulations of the economy like this before. So this is an enormous experiment that I think is going to end very badly. And one thing that you can absolutely prove is that this is the everything except gold and silver bubble right now. PE ratios, the price of a stock compared to the price of a share of stock compared to the earnings that company makes per share, are back up in hyperbubble territory. Real estate values have been pushed back up into bubbles, and now we've got bonds are in a bubble. And, in 2000, we had the NASDAQ, the stock market crashed. 2008, we had stocks and real estate. This is going to be stocks, bonds, and real estate that crash the next time because they're all in. Now we've got a massive bond bubble that's a global thing. It's a debt bubble. And we're also in the second longest economic expansion in U.S. history. This is since, the period of time between recessions. This is the second longest gap between recessions, and there's always a recession around the corner. The Congressional Budget Office has projected that the next recession is going to be in 2029, but not until then, 10 more years. And I think it's in February or March, this becomes the longest economic expansion in U.S. history. There have been somewhere between 47 and 53 expansions and recessions. It's hard to measure them when you get back before the Civil War. And at the same time, whenever this next recession happens, and it doesn't require something to happen in the United States necessarily. All economies are in these bubbles that have been blown by central banks, and China is in one of the most massive bubbles. But if something happens in China, Europe's having a whole lot of problems. Whenever a really bad crisis happens in one of these countries, it'll sweep around the world, and it's going to be global. And so, I'm grateful for the extra time that I've had to get prepared for it. But the thing is, the longer it lasts, the worse the outcome is going to be, because the economy is sort of a closed loop, and they have done a huge amount of manipulation, and all of that energy is going to be released in the opposite direction. And I feel like it's sometime soon. It could be starting right now with the market crashes that we've seen, but I just get the feeling that it's going to happen next year. And I hope it doesn't happen right now. I still want more time to prepare. But I'm getting ready for a large wealth transfer, but at the same time, it's a scary thing. I think this one's going to be bad.
What's very interesting is that the central bank, and you hear a lot of financial pundits, they say, well, this time it's different. It's not the same. We're not going to enter a recession. We don't have to look at the yield curve. And, from your Hidden Secrets of Money and your research that you've done, and you've looked at many different countries, is it that different? Have other countries gone through what we're going through right now?
You mean the bubble?
the entire economy, where we're creating currency, where we're
Japan's been doing this for quite a while since their economy crashed in 1989 was their bubble that popped, and they haven't recovered yet. And so this is that's what happens. You build up certain levels of debt, and their levels of debt in their economy they've been a zombie economy since 1989. They're still trying to get out of it, and the central bank is still doing all of these emergency efforts. Every year there's some new thing announced, Abenomics and all of this stuff, and I mean, they've proven without a doubt that Keynesian economics doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's so this next crash scares me, and the ability to come out of it scares me, because when Japan's economy crashed, they had us to sell to. To whom do we sell goods and services when our economy crashes? And we've got, this is the everything except gold and silver bubble. We've got the stock market back up in a hyper bubble measured by PE ratios or dividend yields. And did I cover, I just did a couple of interviews. Did I cover for your audience what a PE ratio is? Because
No.
I hate,
Yeah.
okay. It's the price of a share of stock divided by the earnings of the company per share. And so it's a real good measure of if you're paying too much or paying too little. And right now we're back into a hyper bubble, and that plus the dividend yields, how much the company pays in dividends for a stock. Real estate is back in big bubbles in most areas. And real estate never, when the real estate crash happened in 2008 in the U.S. and Canada, or U.S. and Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand just sort of took a breath and then kept on running. They are in these immense bubbles, and so is China. I've been to China a few times, and their bubble is a government-mandated bubble. It's a government-funded bubble. And so it's gone into valuations that are insane, to where when it pops, I mean, it doesn't require a problem in the United States to kick off the next global crisis. It could happen in Europe or China or Australia or the United States, and it'll just be global. And this time, we also have the unwinding of the global dollar standard, the world monetary system. We had the classical gold standard before World War I, the intra-war gold standard called the gold exchange standard, the Bretton Woods system from 1944 to 71, and then the global dollar standard. And these are vastly different monetary systems. And people, there's other people starting to warn on this now. I've been giving presentations on the death of the global dollar standard since 2009 and keeping track of all of what I call the nails in the coffin. Every time a country bypasses the U.S. dollar in trade, or there's just all of these things happening. The first nail in the coffin was when Saddam Hussein started selling oil for euros. So there was this huge portion of stability from 71 up until Saddam Hussein started selling oil for euros. And I can't remember if that was 2003 or whatever. And that was the first nail in the coffin. And then they're coming, like several of them every week now. I can't keep up with it anymore. But all of these countries creating their own international payment systems, China opening up oil futures on the Shanghai Exchange, and they're now the world's largest oil importer. So the death of the petrodollar is coming pretty soon, because there's going to come a day where China, being the world's largest oil importer, larger than the United States, just demands that the Saudis and OPEC sell their oil also priced in yuan. And the thing about that exchange is, when Saudi Arabia oil company sells a futures contract and then they deliver the oil and they get paid, they can immediately put that cash into a gold contract and then withdraw the gold from the Shanghai exchange. So even if they don't want yuan, they can get gold. This is coming very rapidly. And when you look at the convergence of these bubbles popping, a market crash, and a potential shift in world monetary system, and some of the world's central banks are getting ready for this, and they actually have. Hungary just bought a whole bunch of gold, increased their gold reserves 1,000%, and in their statement, they talked about the stability of the the world monetary system, and a potential shift away from the U.S. dollar. So this is going to be huge, whatever happens. I don't know when. I hope it's not this year because I would like a little bit more time to get prepared. I just feel like it's going to be next year. But with what the market has been doing lately, I don't know. This could be the beginning of it right now. Who knows?
You mentioned bubble, stock market bubble, housing bubble, and you said gold and silver, they're not in a bubble. Why aren't they in a bubble?
Oh, silver's below the cost of mining. Silver was $50 in 1980. Can you name something that is selling at a discount to its 1980 price? Anything? No, everything is 10 times higher. So silver at 14 something is just, like stupid cheap. And we know, based on a whole bunch of metrics, that real estate is very expensive. Bonds are very expensive. Stocks are very expensive. So basically all financial assets except gold and silver and maybe cryptocurrencies, I have no way of getting a value measurement because there's just not enough history. How do you value a cryptocurrency? It's the value is determined by the supply and demand, and the underlying value is the technology, the code that was written. That's sort of what kicks it off, and the infrastructure of mining rigs and so on. That's the value in cryptocurrencies. But the market of cryptocurrencies has just begun. And it was very tech-savvy people that were invested in Bitcoin at first. And the mainstream is just coming into it now. So the amount of cash that should flow into that sector is huge. But at the same time, there have been the creation of so many thousands of cryptocurrencies where back in 2013, from 2008 to like 20, I can't remember when Ethereum came out, but it was just before the middle of 2014, sometime like 6 months or a year before. So back in 2012, from 2008 to 2012, there was only one cryptocurrency. It was Bitcoin. And now you literally have thousands of them out there. And so I don't know if there's about to be a ton of cash that floods into that sector. But they've inflated basically the currency supply, the cryptocurrency supply, by coming up with so many different cryptocurrencies. But there's a huge future in the technology that underlies cryptocurrencies, and that's more important. The distributed ledger technology. So you're talking about blockchain technology and some variations on it, and hashgraph. And those technologies are going to touch everybody's lives. It's going to run the internet. There will come a day in the future where emails are secured through blockchain or hashgraph or something like that. The power generation, dams, power plants, nuclear plants will all be being run off of a system like this, including the distribution grid and the billing of the power. The traffic lights will be timed by this. Video games, anybody if you're looking at a website on the internet, you're going to be getting served from the blockchain, not from a server farm somewhere. anything that has to do with accounting, recording or storing data, serving data, it's all done better. This is just the best way to do it. And so there's a huge future there. But it's a horse race, and picking the winner is not going to be an easy thing. I view cryptos sort of as a speculation, because some people are going to become very rich on some cryptos. I view gold and silver sort of like a savings account, but right now they're so undervalued, they're going to have a huge potential. I do expect that you're going to see gold somewhere way over $5,000 an ounce someday, pretty soon. I think that there's going to be another recession that's going to turn into a global financial crisis again, and I think the safe havens are going to just take off. And with silver under mining costs, I mean, this can't persist. The reason that silver is under mining costs is because it's a byproduct of mining copper, lead, zinc, and gold. And most of it, that's about 60% of the silver production. And so if we have an economic slowdown, that means there's less wire being made and copper pipe being made for all the homes that are being built all over the world in the real estate bubbles. And there's less lead for car batteries as auto sales slump. And so as the base metals demand goes down, silver supply vanishes and silver will skyrocket. Like I said, it's selling at a discount to its 1980 price. That's crazy. Silver really should be far, far higher, and the low prices just make sure that not enough silver comes to market. So the amount of silver on the exchanges and so on is actually very small. It's much smaller than 1980.
When we go through this recession, depression, collapse of the system, will we still use the dollar? I mean, are we transitioning into a completely new currency?
I don't know. Jim Rickards thinks it's going to be the SDR, the special drawing rights that the IMF has, the World Bank, and so on. I just don't see it. The global dollar standard is falling apart right now at a very rapid pace, and something is going to happen soon. And I know that safe havens will be the asset, the beneficiary of the problems that are going to happen sometime. It feels to me in the next couple of years. Before the end of 2020, there's going to be something really big. I think it's going to be next year. I hope it's not right now, but I've done the best to protect myself from it and capitalize on it, because in these events, there's always a huge wealth transfer. I never made more in a shorter period of time than I made during the crash of '08. So, because I was positioned. I was expecting it. I was positioned for it. I had predicted it in my book, which came out like the month before the crash. So the book became the best-selling book on investing in gold and silver. So, it's fundamentally because Keynesian economics doesn't work. It's not even plausible. And all of the world's central banks are run by Keynesians.
So do you think the new currency, or whatever we're transitioning into, at that point, do you think they're going to have to back the new currency with gold?
The dollar will probably still exist. If it was backed with gold, it would give great confidence, but you'd be talking of a backing that would be somewhere between $5,000 and $40,000 per ounce would have to be the price of gold to back it at any. It depends on. I'm on record as saying gold standards suck. There's a video that I did called "Gold Standards Suck." A gold standard is where instead of actually using gold, you use a representation that's redeemable for gold that's supposedly being held in a warehouse somewhere. We used to have treasury notes that were fully gold backed, and then we had Federal Reserve notes that were 40% gold backed. And then we went to, these are the different monetary systems. Classical gold standard before World War I, fully backed. Intra-war gold standard called the gold exchange standard, 40% backed. And then the Bretton Woods system from 1944 to 71 didn't have a specified backing, and it fell all the way to about 8% before that ended. And now we don't have, the dollar has absolutely no connection to gold whatsoever. What backs the dollar today is a promise to tax you in the future. When a dollar is created, the Federal Reserve counterfeits a dollar, they print it, and then they buy something with it. And that's how it gets into circulation. It's fraud and it's theft. And when they buy something with it, they usually buy a U.S. Treasury bond. What's a U.S. Treasury bond? It's an IOU. Loan the U.S. government $1 trillion today, and over a 30-year period, they're going to pay you back at that trillion plus $1 trillion worth of interest. If that's the way a dollar is created, then that means that the dollars to pay the interest do not exist yet. Yeah. And so that means you got to borrow more into existence to pay the interest. And then that creates the base currency that all fractional reserve lending is created from. And the banks create the rest of the currency supply when you buy a house or a car or sign a credit card. The bank has to have a certain amount of currency on hand, 10% of what they create. And if they've got enough to cover your loan, they just type the dollars into your account. And there they are, presto, brand new dollars. It's a crazy system. It's absolute insanity that we go along with this and we trust this. Every time I pull a dollar out of my wallet, I just start laughing. This is so comical that humans would do this. We've got a piece of paper with a picture of a dead guy and some numbers on it. and you can buy real stuff, or people will work for this piece of paper with a picture of a dead guy. And I used to say that, the dollar, the minute they print it, they've ruined the piece of paper because you can no longer use it for a list. It's got ink all over it. And we trade parts of our lifetimes for this. It's absolute insanity. And then we create a special class of people called bankers that get a special set of laws that apply to them only, where they can commit fraud and theft by creating brand new dollars. These are counterfeit, basically. Any new fractional reserve lending, any new credit that they create, any new base currency that the Federal Reserve and the Treasury create when they swap IOUs, that's all fraud and theft. And we go along with it, and they get to confiscate a certain percentage of our wealth every year through inflation of the currency supply. It's amazing that the whole system works this way, but it does. So we do the best we can with the circumstances that we're given. And but history shows that no fiat currency has ever survived up until the day Bretton Woods ended and we went on a global dollar standard. The whole world was taken off of gold in 1971, pretty much. There were a couple of countries that hung out for a few more years, Russia and Switzerland and so on. But basically the gold standard worldwide ended in 1971. And the Forex, the floating currency exchange, was born. And that has allowed governments all over the planet to create currency at a breakneck pace. And this is all going to end badly because it's an experiment where all countries on the planet are using fiat currencies at the same time, and there have been thousands upon thousands of them before the Bretton Woods system, and not one of them survived. And so, I'm laughing, but it's tragic at the same time.
So when the system comes down, and this is what you've been talking about, will the people finally wake up and say, hey, why are we accepting this from the private Western Central Bank? Will there be an uprising?
I hope it doesn't completely come. Well, it would be nice if we started over again with something real, and we and all laws were applied equally. When you create a special set of laws for banks and bankers and central banks, that is the monetary system is one of the things that is responsible for the tremendous wealth disparity. So I'm not sure if the dollar is going to completely collapse. I just know that there will be a huge wealth transfer from anybody holding dollars or dollar-denominated assets that are in bubbles, and that wealth will be transferred to the people that are holding gold and silver. That's what's happened all the time in the past. It's going to happen in the future. But one of the reasons I'm here is you watched episodes 9 and 10 of Hidden Secrets of Money, didn't you?
That's correct, yes.
How did you like those?
Yeah, I thought they were fantastic.
Okay,
very
this
informative.
is just...
I like them.
It's what?
They were very informative. I like the comparison that with episode 9 with U.S. and Rome. I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, we are going down the same roads that brought down the Roman Empire and caused the French Revolution. And history repeats, but with a twist. And this time it's global. That's the big twist. But I'd love to encourage your listeners and viewers to watch episodes 9 and 10 of Hidden Secrets of Money. We're not trying to sell you anything. It's purely educational, and it shows these startling and scary parallels that we're on. And, whatever the central bank tries, whatever the government tries, somebody has tried something similar in the past, and all you got to do is look at how that turned out, and you got a pretty good idea of how it's going to turn out this time.
Yes. Mike, thank you very much.